Hello and welcome to Radio Somanaut. I'm your host, Whitney Dawn Pyles, and in each episode, I'll be interviewing inspiring and innovative individuals who are impacting the world through somatics, using the modality we call body-oriented coaching. Each one of my guests is a Somanaut. That means they're a graduate of the Somatic School, an online educator that trains coaches to be stewards of the body's wisdom. We'll be hearing their stories and getting particularly curious about how they're carrying this impactful work into their lives and communities. So in the spirit of the Somatic School, my invitation to you is to embrace ease, take a breath in, and allow their words to be a welcome exhale. Hello, hello. Welcome back to Radio Somanaut. This is Whitney Dawn Pyles, and I am here with Tamu Thomas. She is a somatic specialist, leadership coach, workshop facilitator, and fellow podcaster, dedicated to empowering ambitious women who are making the world a better place. She is also the author of Women Who Work Too Much, Break Free from Toxic Productivity, and Find Your Joy. Welcome, Tamu.
Hey, Whitney. Thank you for having me. It is a delight to be here.
Yes, it is a delight to be here with you. Full transparency, I've injured my tailbone. So if you're watching and you notice a lot of movement happening over here with me, I'm just trying to get comfortable and really sink into this conversation. And I'm excited for you to sink into this conversation with me. So Tamu is a fellow Somanaut. Of course, that is the through line. That is the thread that brings us together. So I'd really love to start from that place, if that sounds good to you, Tamu. I'd love to know your journey to the school. Where were you at when you found the Somatic School? And how did you know that it was a right step for you?
I was in the depths of despair when I found the Somatic School. I was recovering from burnout, and I had set up my business about 2 years. No. I set up my business about a year after. No, I set up my business about a year before finding the Somatic School. So I was a children and family social worker. I was extremely burnt out. Once I understood what burnout was, I recognized that I was burnt out for about 7.5, 8 years. And I'm very resilient. I am very optimistic and I am very strong. So I was able to strategize and resilient myself out of or suppress the burnout so I could carry on with what I was doing. And it became too much, and I decided that I wanted to do. I've always wanted to have my own business, and I assumed it would be a social work related business. And then I recognized that so many of the women around me were having a different version of my experience. I decided that my business would actually utilize my social work skills to support women who were just working far too much. And I looked at I did a short positive psychology course, which was great. And I spoke to the lecturer about training as a coach, and he was like, you don't need to train as a coach. He said, social workers are the coaches of the therapeutic world. There's nothing you're going to learn on a coach training that you don't know already. And I was like, okay, cool. But I'm somebody who's just very curious, and I like to know things and I like to learn things. And whilst there are many skills that could be transferred, there are a whole load of things that I didn't have the skill set for. And I looked around the coaching industry, and it was all very mindset heavy. It was about how you're thinking, affirmations. And I love affirmations. I love thinking. I'm known to overthink, right? My brain is one of my favorite places to go. But I recognized how a lot of what was being shared was piecemeal. And what I observed is that it was having people stuck in perpetual cycles, and they were entering into codependent relationships with the coach or the self-improvement modality, whatever it was, because they were not considering how their holistic experience, their systemic experience, and their embodied experience was shaping their psychology, their mindset. And I remember from being a social worker how much work I had to do to support people who couldn't feel, whether it's that they were so dissociated, they didn't have a clue, or they had some kind of sensory issue or neurodivergence that made being in touch with their felt sense, their lived experience, very challenging. And I thought there's way more to it. So positive psychology led me to neuroscience. Neuroscience led me to the wonderful world of somatics. Call it destiny or mobile phone tracking. I opened my phone and there was Nathan with an advert for the Somatic School. And I'd seen other somatic trainings, but there was something about him and about what he was talking about. So I made contact and he kept trying to, these were back in the days prior to the pandemic when you could go in for open days and people did lots of in-person work. And so he kept trying to invite me to some kind of open evening or something. I was like, I already know deep within my bones, I know that you and Somatic School are the ones. I don't need to come. Just tell me where I need to pay. And if I can pay in installments, because I can't pay it all at once. Because I knew deep within, and it's one of those knowings that I just don't even bother questioning. I've got enough experience in life and myself to know that when I have that feeling, it doesn't need to make sense. I just need to go. And that was it. That's how I got there. And let me just, I know I've said a lot because I'm a yapper, but I just want to add one more thing, referring to my book. My life became clearly demarcated by my training with the Somatic School and its founder, Nathan Blair. There was life before the Somatic School, and then life enriched with embodied wisdom afterwards. So, the Somatic School is the first place, and this was on session 1, where I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't been behaving like a human. I've been taught to behave like a machine. And that was it.
You got me so hard with that. Yeah. The humanity. The humanity, just being a human. It's so interesting. I was talking to a different Somanaut the other day, and we were just having this conversation about industrialization and the parts and pieces of ourselves as humans that are quickly I don't even have the words to describe this, but how basically we are encouraged further and further and in different ways to be more like machines. And so you got me right in my heart there. And I just really felt that in my whole being of just that recognition before stepping into module 1, that it was right for you. And as you entered that space, even in that first session, recognizing that you hadn't been behaving, learning, working, existing like a human being. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, let's talk more about that. So I love this I mean I relate so deeply as well to this idea of there was my life before this training, and then there is my life while I was in, and as I've continued to integrate and weave through everything that I've learned. And so yeah, tell me a little bit more about who you've become.
Well, I have become somebody now. When you have coped and numbed your experience with work addiction, like any addiction, you're forever in recovery. But what the training with the Somatic School and being in the environment of the Somatic School and connecting with people who want to connect with people as people has done is it has given me boundaries or a guardrail. So now I actually have something to butt up against. Whereas before there were no boundaries. There were no boundaries. There was just shaming, chastisement, and optimization. Constant optimization. Girl boss, yes, please, I was there, right? And it was a constant cycle of diminishing and not just suppressing, but punching down my humanity, because all the systems and structures around me from pre birth till whenever that was were about your needs are inconvenient. Being inconvenient is one of the worst things you can do. You've got to be convenient, you've got to be nice, you've got to assimilate, you've got to work constantly, and rest is just going to sleep to recover from the grueling grind of today so that you can gruel and grind again the next day. And what the Somatic School helped me do is get in touch with all of the feelings, all of the sensations, and all of the emotions I couldn't articulate but shoved down. So it was almost like head up, lots of activity, and then there was like an icy layer in my chest space, and then a whole load of stuff going on beneath there that I couldn't access because, like, I feel like my freeze response just lived there and it was all frozen. And it helped me begin to thaw and begin to recognize that a lot of the stuff that was stuffed down was bloody good stuff. It's the stuff that makes me me. It's the stuff that helps me to have rich and meaningful relationships with people. It was like, oh, right. So this stuff that I was told in many ways, consciously and subconsciously, is weird or too much or too sensitive or people will take advantage. These are the very connection points that kind of allow me to connect with other people's connection points. And I've been denied that. And rather than being able to get to know myself as a cyclical being, society conditioned me to be mechanical. And those mechanics were based on who I am at the height of my experience. And as a woman, that is usually who I am in that crest of my ovulation phase. That's not supposed to be, and anything other than that is lazy, is ineffective, is unproductive. When also that kind of like extroverted, yay, let's do, come on, let's. That, if I'm not like that, then I'm no good. And the Somatic School and the training we did and the ongoing relationships enabled me to be like, oh no, actually, this is how I accept myself, by befriending those parts that were my best friends, but parenting, conditioning, society said, actually, no. So, the Somatic School helped me welcome those bits. I was very fragmented. I was very, very scattered. And it just enabled me to like slowly, not try and do it intensely, like, come on, everybody, come home now. Like gently welcoming those parts of myself back in a way that didn't feel like overwhelming and taking me over threshold.
Mm. That was such a beautiful image that came for me just there as you said that, as you were calling those parts back home, not with any kind of urgency to, all right, hurry up now, come back, dinner's on the table, but maybe take your time, maybe take the long way, maybe circle around the house once before you come in the door. And there's just a really beautiful image for me in
in the
that.
doorway to, orient to this space because you haven't been here for a long time.
Beautiful, Tamu, beautiful. From what you shared a little bit earlier on, it seems for you there was this piece of, I mean, the holistic piece, the wholeness piece, the all of it together. I think when we start talking about somatics, everyone just defers to it's all about the body, it's all about the body, it's all about the body, but really it's all about the body mind. One word. It's about the wholeness, about calling
Body,
those
mind,
parts
planet.
back home. Body mind planet. Yes, absolutely. So thank you for bringing that in. I'm wondering, so you said you had been in your business for a year before finding the Somatic School. First of all, I'm curious when that was, our timeline here, and then also curious how your business, I know it's changed a lot, but I'd love for you to tell us how your business has changed since.
So I started my business in May 2018. And then towards the end of 2019, and I was just experimenting. I just allowed myself to experiment. I didn't know what it was going to be, and I didn't want to impose something. I didn't have this language, but inside me, I knew I didn't want to impose something on whatever this was going to be. I wanted to experiment and see what stuck, see what landed, see what blossomed. So I gave myself space for that. And so I made contact with Nathan. It was towards the end of 2019. And then the program started in March 2020. We were hearing this stuff about COVID-19. No, maybe it was about 2 weeks before lockdown. We were hearing this stuff about COVID-19, weren't really sure what it was. Meanwhile, I'd had COVID in February 2020. I was an early adopter. I think end of Jan into February. It took me so long. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to make it to the first in-person session because I was so unwell and the recovery took so long, but I was recovered enough to go. We were breathing all over each other and hugging and all of that jazz. Meanwhile, the boogeyman of COVID-19 was all around the place. So that was then. So doing the somatic coach training. So I'm one of these people where I'm neurodivergent. I've got ADHD, was diagnosed at the grand old age of 43. And so I've always had difficulty with structure, with doing things the right way. And I had lots of overt and covert messages that told me the way I do things is the wrong way. So I have like a lot of ingrained stuff about do it right, you've got to do it right, you've got to do it properly. And so I came into the coaching industry where everything was a 3-month program. Everything was about rapid this, quantum that. And so I was like, oh, I don't actually think the kind of transformation I'm offering can be achieved within 3 months. But you say this is the right way, so I'm going to do that. And so I launched a group program at the end of 2019. And it went well, people did well. But what happened was, just before I started the training in March, somebody messaged me and said, I can't believe I'm doing this thing I thought I'd never be able to do. It's because of what we did in your program. And I just want you to know that there was so much in it that I'm still working my way through. So it started in the October 2019, March 2020. This is what this person was saying to me. And I was like, And then joining the Somatic School just helped me change the way I was working. So I had a program called Sovereign, informed by polyvagal theory. Sovereign is the head of state. It's about being the head of your state. And through the somatic coach training, I just thought I'm going to lean back into some of the things I gained from social work, and I'm going to make this a year-long program. Because what I learned as a social worker is that when I worked with families with very deeply entrenched intergenerational difficulties, you could tell whether or not they were going to be able to remain together by the end of the first 3 months. By the end of the first 3 months, families that were going to quote unquote make it were able to have a level of self-awareness. They weren't victims or blaming anymore. And they started to see the value in the support that was being provided. And so I thought, I've noticed that there's this 3-month pattern all over the place. So it gave me the courage to work in my own way. At that time, it was very much about girl boss culture. It was very much about working really hard, being resilient, hustle. There was all of these things like hustle gang, hustle glow, all of these kind of things. And I was like, no. One of the statements that I just said flippantly, and during the Sovereign program, people were like, oh my goodness, that's it. It was go slowly, go gently, go powerfully. It's about, rather than trying to cover lots of ground really quickly, it was about covering the depth of ground and getting to know yourself intimately and not shaming yourself for who you are. So it transformed how I worked. And it's one of these things, it gives you permission to evolve. So one of the learnings for me has been, But I'm somebody that like I'm always going through some kind of metamorphosis. There's always something going on. And it was like, no, that's when you're supposed to change. You're not supposed to wait until the wheels are falling off. That's when you're supposed to do that. So it has meant there's been a constant evolution of my work. So now I've come full circle, and I just launched something where I'm working with people for 3 months because they are now at the level where they don't need a long time. They actually need that intensity so they can implement quickly and test and experiment because they're ready. Whereas previously, when I was working with people over a longer period of time, they were not ready yet for that level of transformation because they were at the beginning of their journey. So one of the things I've learned from the Somatic School, it's not either or, it's and. And I just know that now my strengths, and because I've evolved, because I've grown and I've changed, my strengths are in working with those people who have been personal development junkies, and they are now, in their own recovery, and they want specific strategic consultancy to support them to get to where they want to go in the quickest time that is possible without shattering their nervous systems.
Evolution, this idea of coming back to the beginning, and you're at this like 3-month this 3-month container again, but it's in such a different way.
Yeah.
This coming back to, and of course the yes and the both and
Yes.
and I think that does speak to this really natural, gentle, soft, powerful evolution. And just attending to that and being present for that, and also acknowledging that as a process that's both within and outside of ourselves, and honoring its unfolding. And so all of that makes me really curious about you, Tamu, and what current evolution are you in? Where are you at?
So just before I started my training with the Somatic School, I had a coach, and I just was not ready for the level of coaching she was offering. She saw me now, then. So I say that because we would have our sessions, and she's originally from France. So she's got this beautiful French accent. And she'd be like, Tamu, I hear what you're saying, but I see fame for you. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, actually, as a child, I always wanted to be on stage, not singing, dancing, performing, but I wanted to be speaking to people on stages. And so I'm in my, let's call it fame era, if you want to call it that. I'm definitely in my thought leader. Yeah, let's wind into that. I'm definitely into my thought leadership era and standing on stages and being in places where I am able to reach more people at one time, especially reaching people who are in leadership, so it can have that ripple effect outward. Because whilst I love coaching and being in the coaching space, it feels so much more aligned for me to be utilizing this education and this style of coaching to help lots of people get in touch with themselves in ways they've never been able to, and then be able to extend that outward. So what I am, I'm good at the somatic coaching. I'm great at the keynote speaking and giving people information and tools that they can take off. And if they want to continue that and look at how they can implement that within their workspaces in a more meaningful way, so that they're actually shifting the culture of their workplace, I'm very good at. So I'm good at is and this, whether it's a social work skill, whether it's something that's deeply innate within me, I'm good at taking the theoretical knowledge and distilling it into something practical that can be widespread. And that enables me, like when I do that work, do you know what? I was going to censor myself, but I'm not going to censor myself. When I work in that way, I use up my energy, so I am exhausted but not drained. So it's regenerative. It means that I go to bed and I have a bomb-ass night's sleep, and I am not, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do the other. Whereas with the coaching, particularly the somatic coaching, I think in part because I come from a social work background, in part because I'm very warm, and in the words of Stephen Porges, I can be, not all the time, but I can be a super co-regulator. People feel really safe in my spaces, and they're able to be versions of themselves they've tucked away for a long time, which also means that I'm often a place where people test boundaries for the first time. And when people aren't used to boundaries, they can be a bit combative with it because they're not used to it. I can be the place where if people have complex relationships with their mum, with their mother, because I've got like quite strong maternal energy, I can be the place where they transfer the needs they have from those very early years, and then they want something that is not appropriate. And even their mother can't give it to them now. They're their mother now. They need to give it to themselves. And I have to be really honest, because that sort of behavior activates my savior complex, it means that work really drains me. I'm not using my energy in a good way. I'm using my energy in a codependent way. And it's not powerful for me or the other person. So I remember when I first started speaking to my therapist about this, she said, Tamu, you just got to stop breastfeeding everybody. And I was like, I want my breast back. I want my breast back. I'm not doing this anymore. So that's another reason why my work has had to evolve, because the more I've become aware of myself, it's really lovely for the people who work with me, but I don't want to be perpetuating codependent cycles. I don't just want you to feel empowered. I want you to feel powerful. I want bodies of work that grow and evolve with you. You don't have to keep repeating. It will grow and evolve with you. So this evolution has also been, you don't just do the work you can do. You don't just do the work that you're proficient at. You do the work that brings out your best. There's no debate. I don't have to pathologize it. I don't have to, like, it is what it is. Have I got that feeling? Yes, that's the one. So I find somatic coaching very, very challenging, because when people are able to contact those fragile parts, I find it very hard not to mother those parts. And that's not what they need or ask for. It's not helpful for either of us.
Mm. I'm so glad you didn't censor yourself. That's just a great analogy for me who has breastfed. But yeah, I mean, I have to bring this in. So Tamu and I we're in the accelerator right now together. And it's been a really lovely generative space of going back through these skills, practicing these skills, and then also having projects of our own,
Yeah.
as well as some encouragement around visibility and using our voice and talking about this work together, and as individual practitioners in whatever way we're expressing the work. And that's been really lovely. And I remember maybe it was even the first call, and you just brought in this audacity, the word audacity.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just coming back in for me as you're talking about. I mean, I think there's audacity and courage and just so much self-knowledge in this idea of I can do this. There's a lot that I can offer to the world through coaching people, but what I'm finding is actually regenerative for me, and fuels me and feeds me, and feels aligned to me and right to my soul, is taking these skills and taking this education and really applying it forward into thought leadership, into public speaking, into reaching many at once.
Yeah.
And really cultivating this invitation into powerfulness, into feeling empowered and powerful.
Yes.
As individuals in community. And I think that's just that that's where you are on your journey. I mean, I think there's many ways that this work can be expressed, and that's really why we're excited to do this podcast. So I'm really glad you didn't censor. I'm glad you brought this in, and I am curious about how, as we trained, it was really for a one-on-one coaching space. That's what we were doing. That's how we were practicing. That's how we've continued to even practice in the accelerator. So I'm really curious about, and it could just be an example or however you want to share about this, but I'm finding myself really curious about like which skills or what are you finding you've learned with the Somatic School is really powerful in this thought leadership context.
I just want to say something real quick about the training. So whilst the training was focused on one-to-one, I took it straight away to group because I do one-to-one work, but the majority of my work at that time was group coaching. I was still very much recovering from burnout, and one-to-one coaching just reminded me too much of social work. So immediately I applied it to group, and it was really effective within the group setting. So doing it in the kind of thought leadership space is an extension of that. And I think maybe a number of neurodivergent people will relate to this. We see links where people don't see links. We see links where people see barriers. So straight away, I was able to see how this could be applied to a group setting. So I've been in a group environment where we have done something like taking in the good, or mishmash rooted in focusing. And I have been on stage with 100 people and we have taken in the good together, for example. And one of the things I am passionate about is dispelling the idea that somatics has to be this really intimate thing in this really special way with this really structured way of setting the container. Like, everything we do is embodied because we're in a body. This is our soma, the vibrant living body. Like what I'm doing right now, wiggling my arms, for those of you that are listening, not watching, that is somatic, right? So it's about, how can I make this accessible to the really thinky, cognitive, overthinking type A people who literally feel like they have no connection with their body? Because that's what I used to do with the families I used to work with as a social worker. How do I help people understand that their needs are a bid for connection? And when they meet their needs, they are much more likely to have the capacity to not meet the needs of somebody else, but to hold space for the needs of somebody else. How can a leader who understands the basics of the autonomic nervous system, the autonomic ladder, and how we experience safety and connection through the body, how can they take that into how they have appraisals with people? How, when things arise in the office, they have the skills to be able to repair ruptures, and they see rupture as an opportunity for deepened connection. How do we can utilize this work so that people can know how to quickly bring in some regulation when they're about to experience conflict or somebody raises something that is a challenge? I had so many women come to me and talk about their experience in work where, if they had a phone call from school because their child needed to be picked up, and the person they report to is saying it's fine, but their whole body language is like, oh my gosh, what a massive inconvenience. Do you have to go? All of this, like all of these things, I'm able to transfer that into, this is how we human, actually. And if we remember that this is how we human, we're going to have much less division. We're going to understand that connection and belonging is bloody hard. It is harder than division and separation. But if we can recognize that, we can build our capacity, because it's like strength training. The more you practice, the stronger you become, the more you're able to hold. You're then able to understand that connection and belonging is not about homogeny. It's not about agreement. It's about being able to stay in relationship when you disagree. It's about being able to know that somebody is doing something that is wrong. Like, we know there's no two ways about it. This is wrong. And still expand your consciousness to see if you can have some understanding, so that you're able to bring that person back in rather than immediately cut them off. There are times where we have to call it a day. And I am not talking about codependency, but I am talking about building the skills to actually meet the person within and call forward the best in them if they have it available to share. Sometimes people don't. So where my strengths are in bringing those things and giving people a taster of those exercises. So they're like, okay, I'm not going to treat this with suspicion and contempt. I'm not going to write this off as woo-woo frivolity. I'm actually going to recognize that there are some things there aren't a science to, and I'm very happy with that, because we don't need to understand the ins and outs of everything to know it's effective. But there are some things, oh, actually, no, there is a science behind this. And when you meet me here and you help me connect with myself here, I can actually feel the science within this. And I start to understand that we are inherently biological, emotional beings, and our psychology is a product of our biology and our emotionality, for lack of a better word. And if I can give myself that grace, I can extend that to other people, so that we can, rather than exploit each other and exploit our planet, we can work in ways that are supportive and sustainable. So rather than optimizing for maximum productivity, which can never ever be sustained, we're optimizing for regenerative productivity. And positive psychology research shows us that that type of productivity is about us working at about 80% of our physical and mental capacity. None of this 110% business that we have all over the internet and in the places we work is just not possible. It's about helping people understand. Like, in my book, something that people really grasp onto is a section where I talk about the difference between your capacity and your capability. The way our productivity works right now is so focused on our capability. That's a very mental concept. But our body would tell us what our capacity is. And what we do when we zoom out and see the bigger picture, and we remember that our body operates differently depending on the time of day, the day of the week, the day of the month, we start to recognize that our capacity. I used to have therapy on a Friday afternoon. It was terrible. And my therapist kept trying to therapize. I said, do you know what? I know myself. It's because I'm tired. I am too tired. We swapped to Monday, totally different experience. It's about getting to know yourself. I could have judged myself by that Friday and decided that the whole of my productivity rests on what's happening right here, right now. But when you zoom out and see the bigger picture, I know that I start off better because I'm usually doing something restful or joyful at the weekend, which then refills my cup so that on Monday I've got more. So when we're able to get to know what our capacity is, rather than be really mean to ourselves and tell ourselves we're lazy, we recognize that today my capacity, like my capability, wants me to be smashing all the to-do lists. But today I'm going to be doing the minimum on my to-do list, the minimum to get by. I'm not dropping everything, but I'm doing the minimum to get by. I'm not going to shame myself. I'm not going to tell myself off, because I know that when I do this, there's going to be a few days where I'm so powered up. In those 2 days, I'm going to do almost a month's worth of work, because I'm so alive, and I'm not going to have to recover afterwards, because that's how my energy, my cyclical energy, is flowing.
Mm. Yes, I'm thankful I'm at a standing desk for this conversation, because I'm finding myself just moving with you, and just I'm moving my hips in a circle, and just this cyclical nature and this inquiry into how do I best work in a way that is sustainable and regenerative and supportive of not just me, but who and what I am in support of. I mean, it feels so simple, but it is also so it's so different from what we have, what we're working with, the systems that we're operating within at the moment, especially if you're in the Western industrialized world. And yeah, just this idea of, and I am gravitating towards that as well, capacity versus capability. This idea of I can, but but should I? But should I?
Exactly. What's the
Yeah.
trade-off going to be?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's so much there. And this idea of regenerative productivity is something that I want to come back to. I love that you've shared a couple times around what people have gravitated to. So it is interesting. We put out a body of work, or we just exist in the world as a coach, and or we're on a stage, or we're on camera, or just on social media, or whatever. And usually we say a lot, say a lot in those spaces, but it's really interesting. It is interesting what people
Yeah.
hear and
Mhm.
gravitate to. And
Mhm.
there's something about that, meeting people where they're at, that I heard earlier on as you were talking about, taking these concepts that can very easily be labeled esoteric, or woo woo, or just really heavy or lofty or even heady.
Yes.
Um, but just taking these really important philosophies and ways of being in the world and just distilling it down
Yeah.
so that the people that really need to receive it, type A, in their head, really cognitive, even they can hear and
Yes.
take in the good. And I love also this image of you with an audience taking in the good. And I mean, the whole reason that this podcast exists is because we're talking about the impact and the ripple effect of just this work. What fascinates me is the ripple effect of this work and how,
Ripple Effect is my book. I
yes.
100% would not have been able to write my book the way I wrote it without the experience of the Somatic School, which is why I was naming them in the book. Because I've always had a knack of being able to write in a way that people can feel. But the somatic coach training and then all the other stuff I've learned since then, I'm writing for human beings. Like when I said, this is a love letter to your nervous system. And a love letter to your nervous system, it doesn't just be like, oh, gentle and whimsical. Sometimes our nervous, like one of my former clients said, Tamu, your work is equally confronting and comforting. Like we need it all, right? There are times when we need to give ourselves a hard stop. We have a sympathetic nervous system for a reason. There are times that we need to slow down so that we don't collapse. And if we do collapse, let's just enjoy it whilst we're down there. Let's savor the experience of being down there. And when we're in that ventral space, let's really take advantage of, being able to take the risk of truly living. And I was able to, when I was meeting with publishers about the book, they were fascinated by the somatic element. And I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't done somatic experiencing training. I'm not Gabor Mate. I Then Porges like, oh my goodness. And they were like, no, we want what you do and what you say. We want to hear it from you because when I hear it from you, it makes sense and I can see how I can apply it into my life.
Okay. We're here. We're talking about the book, and what you said earlier about your evolution and being in your fame era, that's really alive for me. And also, fame. It's taking a lot for me to not break into song and dance. But in your fame era,
Mm-hmm.
and even what you're saying here about the nervous system, and it's not all gentle and ease. We have a sympathetic nervous system for a reason. We have to step into something bigger for ourselves. And so it takes all of these parts and all of these states to arrive somewhere like a fame era. So your book, right? Meeting
Yeah.
with publishers, you
Yeah.
just were a cover girl on the front of Freelancer magazine. So that, I mean, the thought leadership, the public speaking, like all of these bits and pieces of your fame era that you're in now.
Mm.
I mean, it takes a lot to just be able to step into that. And so that's what I'm finding myself really curious about is what did you have to know? What did you have to feel and believe about and beyond yourself that has really equipped you to be in this moment on the front of a magazine, having published a book, standing up in front of audiences. Yeah.
What I had to know and own is that not doing this through fear of whatever it was that I perceived to be unsafe, that not doing it is way more unsafe for me as a human being than doing it. The risk of being perceived incorrectly by other people is a better risk than deliberately perceiving myself wrongly. I just couldn't cheat on myself. Really, it's if I'm supposed to be here to have a big impact and do great things, and I don't do that, on my deathbed, when I'm revisited by all of the past versions of myself, they won't just be disappointed, they'd be furious. They'd be furious that innate gifts and talents were squashed, suppressed, oppressed, depressed, because I was worried about what somebody on the outside might say. And it literally, like when I sat with it, it literally felt like squeezing myself into some kind of dorsal vagal shutdown because it felt too big. So it was just like, I could make some big grand, but it was like, literally, you're big anyway. So you pretending you're not, you're now making yourself an empty vessel, making a lot of noise. What have you got to lose? And also writing my book and having like, before all of my thoughts and feelings were like, wow, all over the place. And then they came together in the book. And when I saw it all together, it was just like, who are you to not lose people? If there are, because one of my things is, and that's, the savior complex, like it's codependency. So if I am concerned with losing people because they can't accept who I am, what I'm saying to myself is I'm going to abandon myself and deny who I am so that I can continue to squeeze into relationships that are too small and that are unwilling to grow, so there's enough space for both of us. So, okay, cool. So tell me, what you're saying is you're contributing to your own demise. That feels yucky to me. That feels putrid. It feels awful. And what I came to recognize is that anybody who is offended by me just being me, not evangelizing, not preaching and saying you should do this, you should do that, but me having big goals for myself and wanting to do big things for myself. Anybody who feels any kind of way that is unsupportive of that, well, you've just given me data. You're not supposed to be in my life in the way you are currently. Like, I'm not necessarily saying, oh, I'm going to cut you off, but it just means that rather than being in the front row, you've got to move back. I can't have you in my eye line all the time. And we talk a lot about relationships where we can be tender and vulnerable. But we always think about tenderness and vulnerability as I'm having all of these problems. This isn't working well. One of the most vulnerable things is to say, I've got this great idea. I think I'm going to kick ass with it. That's really vulnerable. It's really vulnerable to say, I am so fucking proud of myself. I've worked so hard to be able to do this thing. It is really vulnerable to say, do you know what? I'm really grateful for what I've got, but I've outgrown it. I'm going to go for more, especially in a world that tells us we've got to live in this place of scarcity, that tells me that as a Black woman, I should be grateful for what I've got. Pipe down. Don't have ideas that are too big for your boots. You don't want to intimidate people. I had so many messages about not intimidating people, not wanting to come across as an aggressive Black woman and all of this kind of stuff. And I'm like, do you know what? I just need to be out here doing what I'm doing, being who I'm being. I cannot live life like a pair of too tight, skinny jeans. No way.
Oh, we know what that feels like, Tamu.
Right?
Oh my gosh.
You sit down in those jeans or
Yes,
laugh
we did.
or eat a full plate of food.
Yeah, thank you so much. And this, with growth, there's an inevitability of outgrowing
And grief.
spaces, seasons, and it's all, I mean, it just connects so well with a lot of what's come through in this conversation, which is not keeping yourself static in one place. I mean, even in the sense of our capacity over a month's time or a week's time or a day's time, in the sense of really needing to care for ourselves. But there's also something about the seasonality
Yeah.
of life, and there are seasons to be growing and gaining and bigger and taking up more space, and there should also be permission for those days where we need to get really small and get really quiet. And so
Yes.
there's so much in what you're sharing about just embracing the full spectrum of human, right? That's the
Yeah.
human experience,
Yeah.
and possibility and potential, while also honoring the parts of us that need to slow down and get quiet and be still. And so I love just the idea of the full spectrum, and something you said earlier as well about being neurodivergent, seeing the links between things. And this is a conversation on this podcast with Nathan and other Somanauts, just like the bridginess of this group of humans,
Yeah.
and really finding and seeing unconventional connection where there might not have been articulated connection before. And
Mhm.
so it's what's coming for me as a result of that statement, and so much of what you shared, is it's just creating the right size space to exist and share, and not be limited, but be able to be in all of these versions of ourselves and whatever it is we're creating for ourselves in our life.
Mhm.
And I think that's such a powerful message, because we have so much conditioning and information and data coming in from everywhere. We just have so much messaging around what we should be doing and how this should look. And so I love what you've been actively creating for yourself, and how you're sharing that
Mm.
with me and with us today. So there's a whole bunch of gratitude, and there's a whole lot of movement happening. Like I said, I'm on my feet, but with what you're sharing, but it's prompting me to ask you. So in thinking about, in whatever capacity you're working with people, if they've just read your book, if they're in the audience, if they're in a smaller group, if they're in a workshop, if they're just engaging with you on the street, is there a posture or some kind of movement that you want people to feel as a result of engaging with you?
Oh my goodness, goosebumps. What a question. It would be it would be a it would be a hot, like, but let's not be mean. Let's be generous. It would literally be your whole body moving in a wavy motion, lots of gyrating, circular, like anywhere where there's a hinge in your body, for that to be moving like waves, and a little bit sensual, and maybe you rotate and you're like, oh, I like what happens when I roll my hips in this way. So I'm going to enjoy it a bit more and do it slower. And I would want people to move in a way that is swirly and curvaceous and round, and really enables them to get in touch with that sensual inner
Mm.
being.
Mm.
Yes.
Humanity. Yes.
Mm.
For the listener, if you haven't done that already, whether you're listening or you're watching, just an invitation here to find that enjoyment. Thank you so much for that. I love that's already been I have been doing as a result of engaging with you. So
Yeah.
thank you. And
Yeah.
from here, I mean, we've talked a bit about like your work in the context of um public speaking, I mean, coaching, group coaching, this, but there is something bigger than that we talked about before we hit record, and that's um, policy change
Yeah.
impacting systems,
Yeah.
right? I'd love to talk a little bit more about that.
My ideal would be to have a company that provides work, coaching, consultancy for organizations, because the organization will be right in the field with the people who are impacted the most, take that work and also do official research and share that with the government and say, you have created this new working time directive. This is what the people are saying. You are exploring how you can make parental leave more expansive. This is what the humans are saying. Or you are talking about flexible working, like at the moment, they want people to be back in the office full time just for presenteeism. Actually, this is what the people are saying. And when we take into consideration human biology and how our nervous system functions, this is the impact of this thing. So you have thought about it, you have theorized, you have focused on making companies more profitable. How about making people's health more bountiful? How about working in a manner that is going to, like, governments are forever talking about the family unit. Where on earth do people who work, even if you work part-time, where on earth do they have time to have a thriving family unit? We work to support how we live. If we want thriving economies, if we want thriving human beings, if we want to create workplaces where people really want to work, an education system that supports the future of our workforce, the future of our planet, if we want to start to work within the boundaries of our planet, if we're really serious about environmental change and all of that kind of stuff, we have to review everything and we have to understand how it impacts the human body, because the way it impacts the human body is a reflection of how it impacts the earth body. We are children of this earth. We're not separate. When people say we're part of nature, no fam, we are actually nature. And when we can understand this, rather than creating policies and laws and structures that impose on life, and I mean human life and the life of this planet, we will then be able to create policies and structures that support the life of this planet and the life that lives on this planet. And that's ultimately what we want. And so I want to be able to bring all of that knowledge, because when you look at these policies and values and mission statements that are plastered on company websites and the things that you might find, like in the UK on .gov.uk, none of it has been designed understanding what it is to be a human. None of it has been designed in a way that understands connection and belonging. We've got this whole debate and suppression of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging happening right now. If we all understood our nervous systems and the biology of human connection and belonging, and I put connection and belonging together because a lot of the narrative about connection is actually transaction, it's not actually real connection. If you understood the biology of it and understood that that connection and belonging is a biological need, we cannot survive without it, never mind thrive, you would review the systems and policies you're putting in place. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging will become foundational rather than an add-on. And you will see that it's not like pie, whereas if you take a piece out, you're taking away from somebody else. You will actually see that it becomes like the mycelium network within the soil that shapes all of who we are. And it wouldn't even be a question. You would understand that a difference of values, opinions, or whatever doesn't mean that now you have to be against me and I have to be against you. We start to understand that unity is not uniformity. Unity is your needs butt up against my needs. So let's see where we can compromise, where we just have to say, okay, this is what it is, and where we have points of connection. Because we are all human beings with organs, a nervous system. We all have fundamental needs in common.
We began this conversation talking about needs and how dare you have needs. And so creating actual spaces, cultures, systems, societies that operate on just the simple idea that we are human beings with needs. I mean, again, another moment where it sounds so simple. Yes, it really is so revolutionary. And I think this message that you're carrying and everything that you've just expressed, there's a lot of hopelessness right now and burnout and overwhelm as a result of the world not operating in the way that you're talking about. And so I just want to name that. And as a final question, I'm going to say this is the final question. What would you leave the listeners with? An encouragement, an invitation, an idea?
I would encourage you to allow yourself to be tired, allow yourself to be bereft, allow yourself to be angry, but don't allow yourself to lose hope. We cannot afford to lose hope. And when I think about different points in history, the civil rights movement in America, the abolition of slavery, World War II, the suffragettes, if they had surrendered to a feeling of hopelessness, a lot of the freedoms we enjoy today wouldn't be present. You can absolutely be burnt out and still be hopeful. You can absolutely feel like I am on my last crumb of energy and still be hopeful. I want us to dedicate our energy to creating a very vivid sensory picture of what is possible for all of us should we decide to choose hope, to choose rest. Absolutely, because that's going to fuel us and it's our divine right, and get very clear on what we are creating collectively for the collective. And that is when we're going to be able to make real, meaningful change.
Thank you so much, Tamu Thomas. This has been Radio Somanaut. I hope for all of us, for Tamu and I in this conversation, as well for anyone listening, that you found something nourishing, inspiring, galvanizing, even in this chat today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
That's our show, folks. I hope you found something nourishing, enjoyable, or inspiring in today's episode. Thank you for being here, and see you next time. In the meantime, you can follow us on Instagram at Radio Somanaut. You can also find out more about the Somatic School and our accredited diploma in body-oriented coaching at thesomaticschool.com, or follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. This is Whitney Dawn Pyles, encouraging you to stay present, stay curious, and stay connected.